Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! My mom was handicapped due to a stroke and she had to use a walker to get anywhere. Her and my dad loved this local seafood restaurant. It was their favorite place to go to dinner. It was a really popular restaurant and was always crowded. It had a long line to get in. We get to the restaurant and my dad drops us off near the front and he goes to park. The line was long as usual to get in. My mom and I waited for what seemed like forever to get to the hostess stand. My dad had come in at this point, and my poor mom had to stand up the entire time because they had no seats to sit and wait. We finally get to the front of the line and this guy pushes his way to the front and starts yelling that he needs to make a reservation. At the last time he was there, they had screwed up his reservation. Meanwhile, we had waited in this line and finally made it. My poor mom is standing up this whole time and this guy just takes over. The hostess doesn't say not one word to us. She just lets him take over and takes his reservation info for 9 people for the end of the week. She never once said I'm sorry for the wait or told him he had to wait his turn. Nothing. I was so pissed. My parents didn't go out a lot. They would look forward to going to this restaurant so much when they were able to go. It was difficult for my mom to get around with the walker. They usually would wait until one of us could go with them to assist my mom. The guy was so rude, so obnoxious, and so entitled. Seriously, I was so livid. So the next day I called the restaurant and cancelled his reservation. I remembered everything he said and I pretended to be his wife. Lesson to be learned: do not mess with my mom. God rest her soul. She didn't have many opportunities to enjoy life after her stroke, and that guy messed with her. My only regret is that I couldn't go back the night of the reservation to see his reaction. Edit. We did have a reservation. However, the line to get to the front to give our name was incredibly long. Normally, she could have sat down on one of the benches while I stood on line, but there were no seats available. No one offered to give her a seat either. She also couldn't sit in a bar because the bar stools were too high for her to get up on. My mom was partially paralyzed from her stroke. It was difficult for her to get around, and I would never ever deny her the opportunity to go to her favorite restaurant. Both my mom and dad knew what I did because I told them. They both laughed and said I was crazy. They both wished they could be there on Friday night to watch his reaction too. We are the second to last house at the end of a cul-de-sac. You can drive in, but there is no room to turn your car. You need to drive backwards all the way out. When we got the house, we did a core renovation. And with the we, I mean my whole family. My father died from Alzheimer's disease a few years ago. And my mother had a stroke shortly after. I don't have any siblings, so I love my in-laws like my own parents. I consider my brother-in-law my brother. With a few exceptions, electrics, we did all the renovation by ourselves. In the last house in the cul-de-sac lives an elderly lady with her grandson. They drive all the way up and park in front of their house 24/7. The way in the cul-de-sac is public and very narrow. Only one car fits through. They get visitors every day, usually the daughter or her brothers. They also drive all the way up and park there, even when there is no space to do so. In this case, they just park in front of our house and all the way down. On national holidays, the visitors clock down nearly the whole cul-de-sac, as they all visit the elderly lady and cannot be bothered to park outside the cul-de-sac. About 100 meters down the cul-de-sac, at the entry point there is plenty of space to park cars. Downside, you have to walk 100 meters. So whenever we would briefly drive up to your house to unload building material, you could bet that either someone had to drive out or up. At first, we would move our car in the midst of unloading, all the way down and then back up. After a while, we noticed that they needed to go down usually 5 minutes after we started unloading. Not always, but a lot of times. When this happened and they needed to go down, we moved the car down, and then back up, and continued unloading. And while we were still unloading the needed to get back up, we stop unloading, drive our car down, they go back up and we follow. You get my drift. We usually did not have to bring the car up for unloading more than 2 to 3 times a day. So after a while we would politely ask them to wait a few minutes for us to finish. They could not be bothered to wait. They often just parked their car behind our car and left, trapping our car. We then had to wait. Usually the case, or go up to their house and ask them to move their car. This went back and forth for about 6 months. In the heat of the summer, when we cleaned out our garden, basically removing the jungle, my father-in-law collapsed. We immediately called an ambulance and thought he had a stroke. The ambulance arrived shortly after, and the EMTs went to my father-in-law in the garden. The ambulance car stayed in front of our house, of course in order to help my father-in-law in the best way possible. About 5 minutes in, the grandson arrives and notices that he cannot get through to his house. A big ambulance blocking the way. He gets out, comes into our garden, and tells us to move the ambulance as he has to get through. No one reacts at first, as the EMTs treat my father-in-law. After 1 or 2 "excuse me," he gets loud. He walks up to the EMTs and tells them in a very loud voice to move their car. The EMTs ignore him and we try to get him to step back. After not being able to get the ambulance moved, he leaves. A few minutes later, the EMTs decide to move my father-in-law to the hospital. But guess what? The grandson's car is blocking the ambulance from leaving the cul-de-sac. One EMT gets pissed and goes up to the neighbor's house. Rings but no answer. Rings again. No one reacts. He goes around the house and sees the elderly lady eating with her grandson. Of course, they could not be bothered to move the car. Long story short, his car had to be towed. The aftermath. Thank God it was not a stroke, but my father-in-law had collapsed due to the heat. The EMT or the police seemed to have reported the incident and city official came to assess the parking situation in case an ambulance or the fire department would have to respond to an emergency again. They told our neighbors that they are not allowed to park in front of their house longer than it takes to load or unload their cars. They ignored this at first, but the city followed up on that, and the tickets are getting more and more expensive as they are willfully ignoring the city's order, as the city official comes by to check regularly. We now have bets running when they are going to park down the street. The story starts in the year 2013 when I had received my first job in healthcare. I was doing HR for a facility. It was a part-time gig willing to train. Sounds like a dream to a just in my 20s me. It had all been fast food and customer service prior, so needless to say I was finally getting my breakthrough. Walking into the office on the first day I met my new boss. She seemed pleasant enough. Nothing to worry about. She just seemed happy to finally have an employee. I was eager to learn and very smart. I perfected the paperwork side within a week. She told me how impressed she was and encouraged me. After that week or so, the dark started to slip up. It started with little comments about how small and tiny I was, and how she could just pick me up and throw me. After a month or so, it started escalating into, "You only got hired because you're cute and young." Side note, my administrator was female and straight. She would continually find different ways to bring me down about being skinny, attractive, and young. She then started to pin her errors in her work on me, which usually backfired. Keep in mind, this was a tiny office that she had arranged to where my desk faced a wall and her desk faced the back of my head. It was like she was always breathing down my neck. After about a year of it, I quit my job and went into a completely different field. I later found out I was her first employee as she had just finished her degree. This was her first chance to be boss man. About a year after I had quit, the new administrator asked me to come back in a better position with higher pay. I asked if she still worked there, and that's when he told me the story. They had to walk her off-site. She had not been doing any of her job duties, and after I left, that had become apparent to the company. They let both the administrator and her go, but only she had been walked out. I guess it didn't go smoothly. He was calling because he had heard of how well I did and how she directly caused my leaving. It was no secret in the company. I accepted this position and worked there for about another year. I then moved on to an even better one somewhere else. Sounds all great and dandy, right? But wait, there is more. So I have been in this new position at this completely unrelated but still a nursing facility for about 2 years. I'm part of the interdisciplinary team now. I'm one of the boss men and life is great. But then she appears, not as a boss man, but as a nurse. This was completely unrelated to her prior degree. Also, really karma of all places, she ends up at my work. Well, I'm a naturally loving, nice and understanding person. So when I see her, I let bygones be bygones. Years have passed and we were both adults. I figured things would be different. I am not a direct boss of hers, but I'm her superior now. There are no issues for about a month and then all of a sudden, all of my employees start getting weird warnings and talkings about how they are improperly doing things. Keep in mind it was only ever on my days off that she would have these issues with them. So the battle began again. But I knew a lot more this round. Over the next year or so, she takes every opportunity to try to shame my employees in my department and each time she gets herself in trouble. It got to the point she lost her privileges to supervise her own CNAs because her antics have backfired so much. Now to the present. 4 years into this job. About a week ago, I accepted a new job with a very lucrative company that will train me to be the next regional GM of all the administrators. So basically the opportunity that makes careers, and they will pay me to get a full education and training in their very established named company. Finally, my sweet revenge. This conversation happens in our company smoking area. I tell her, it's crazy to think we have worked together so long now. 5 years on and off. Yeah, we have seen some things together. I remember you had just graduated school back then. That was your big break, wasn't it? Your kids were finally in high school and they were doing so well. She never told me any of this. I heard it through the grapevine. Yeah, that was a waste of $60,000. I never could find another place that would hire me. She screwed over the last company so bad, it sold 8 months after I quit. The new company was the one that hired me back. Oh, I always wonder why you went back and got your nursing degree. By the way, I never asked, but I already knew she had been shunned from the industry of dealing with money. Well, I had to pay back all the debt somehow and then pay for the kids' college. So nursing seemed right. She has been a CNA for years before finishing her bachelor's. Oh, I thought your son had dropped out and one ran away to dad's. Also, all that school means you're now like $80,000 in debt too. Who told you that? Doesn't matter. I will see you inside. Before going out to the smoke break, I had sent out a mass message to all my employees and most of the people that worked there. They all loved me and I had most of their personal numbers from a fundraiser I had thrown for my employee. I waited so she basically walked in 10 steps behind me and had to follow down the long corridor of offices as I started being congratulated by all the staff. This of course gave me the opportunity to gush all the details of this amazing opportunity right in her face. I will also get that chance for about the next 20 days. As our facility requires a 30-day and employs a lot of people, and everyone knows me. From residents to management to the corporate general managers, all the way to the main owner. What can I say? I'm friendly. Let's recap some facts. She has $80,000 in debt plus her son's debt too, one failed bachelor's degree, one marginally successful certification, no supervisory provisions and no prospects. Most companies won't hire her due to the shutdown caused by her. I started this industry with no formal education. I have no student loans. I'm fiscally stable and not quite 30 yet. I'm getting ready to enter a program that will pay all the way to a master's and wants me to control the region within 2 years. So within 6 years of starting, I have already surpassed her fiscally. Within the next 4 years, I will be her boss's boss's boss. Oh, life is good sometimes. Not too bad for getting hired on my looks alone and being idiotic and young. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.